justice for the blind, just something that'll find in the rhyme that are coming
let's
from my
move on
mind.
here. So you know what? Let's stay in the Knicks era. I'm gonna come a little bit more recent, and I'm gonna talk about Patrick Ewing for a bit. Patrick Ewing is the forgotten center of the 90s, I would say, partly because he doesn't win, and partly because, you know, he comes along at a time where, one, he's drafted the same year as MJ is drafted, and then, is he drafted? Yeah, he's drafted the same year as MJ is drafted, and is shoehorned kind of in the middle of Hakeem's greatness, of David Robinson's fucking explosive scoring. He is coincided with the beginning of the Shaq era, and just can't get past MJ and the Bulls, which is the story for a lot of great players. Patrick is you could argue is the greatest Knicks center of all time in front of Willis Reed. You could make the argument. Averages of 21, 10, 2.4 blocks. That's his career average at 50% field goal shooting. But important to note that Patrick's career ends in a whimper on Orlando. And, you know, just kind of brings down those numbers. He's 39th all-time in win shares at 126. And in the playoffs is just steady. 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 2.2 blocks. 47% in the playoffs. So it drops down a little bit, which is, again, aside from Jerry West, outside of Jerry West, the majority of NBA players, their playoffs, their percentages take a hit when they get into the playoffs. So, you know, not a big deal, but I think people sometimes remember Patrick for the massive knee pads, for missing that bunny layup. You know what I mean? For missing the bunny layup and stuff like that. But this was a defensive presence in the NBA. This is one of the best all-time NBA centers. If he comes into the NBA today, is immediately vaults whatever team he's on into finals contention. I mean, let's say Patrick Ewing was the first overall pick. I'm not even going to say he goes to the Thunder. I mean, to the Warriors. But let's say Patrick Ewing comes in and is I don't even know who's in contention right now for the worst records right now. The Hawks. And let's say Patrick is picked by the Hawks. Well, guess what? Next year the Hawks are going to be in the playoffs very easily. And yeah, I mean, people just forget. People forget. Even the documentary that the most famous documentary we have now, kind of that include the Knicks, is the Reggie Miller documentary, and that's all about Reggie. You know what I mean? Kind of just torturing them. But even that's a little overblown. Reggie's numbers against the Knicks are not fantastic. He doesn't necessarily beat them every year. The Knicks are stopped by the Bulls. There was a great stat I read about. I'm not gonna remember what the stat was, but essentially the stat was just that in the 93 playoffs, I want to say it was, that the Knicks were by most statistical measures were the team right behind the Bulls. They are right under the Bulls, essentially saying if they go to the finals, they're winning that year, and they just couldn't get past the Bulls. And that's the story of Patrick's career. He's not the flashy scorer that David Robinson was, or that Hakeem was. And Hakeem gets those two titles when Jordan evacuates the throne to allow someone to get them. And Patrick then runs smack dab into Shaq. And you know, that's kind of the end of Patrick's career, but one of the all-time great centers. What do you got to say about Patrick?
Yeah, man, Pat was drafted the year after Jordan, because he stayed all 4 years at Georgetown, and Michael left after his third year at UNC. But yeah, he's the first overall pick in '93. They're the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, a few games behind the Sun. And yeah, they go to, I think, Game 7 with the Bulls in '93 and lose. And that was like sort of their best chance.
And I think that's the MJ scores 54 against them that year, if I'm not mistaken, in the playoffs. But go ahead. I'm sorry, not to cut you off.
Yeah, no, it's just another one of those guys that ran up against Jordan. And once Jordan leaves, they lose. I think they lose the '94 finals to the Rockets, and then the following year the Spurs lose to the Rockets.
Yeah.
When Olajuwon gets all up in
the Magic.
The
Magic.
Yeah, the Magic lose to the Rockets. Yeah. but that was the year Elijah was famous for getting inside Dave Robinson's asshole. But
Yep.
anyway, yeah, and I think the team, like Pat Riley gets a lot of credit for being a great coach and GM and president and all that, and he is. But the one thing that New York team was always lacking was a perimeter creator, somebody who can get his own shot on the perimeter, but also get a good shot for his teammates. Where like most of their guards, like first it was Mark Jackson, who was very much so pass first point guard, and then most of his game was transition or half court posting up, which you can't do when you have your whole front line as post players essentially. And then after Mark, it was just, a bunch of different guys, Doc Rivers, Derek Harper, John Starks. Like none of these guys you could really rely on in key moments, in particular John Starks.
Yeah.
But all those other guys were like pass first guys. Then you had, like, imagine that team. Like, it's just, and like, they're not as hard to watch as you would assume. Just because of how much athleticism is on the floor, even though they're all like enormous human beings. But man, like, talk about no spacing. You got Pat Oakley, Charles Oakley, that is, and then like Xavier McDaniels or whoever else. And it's like, how are you guys, or Mason, how are you guys scoring ever? You should be really easy to guard. How is Patrick ever getting room in the post? And I think that's just the fault of the times. I think you add a couple more guys. You add if they had like a small forward, they'd be more of a swingman than a bigger guy, and they had a guard that could create his own shot. I think Patrick's career is a lot different than it ended up being, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, and even to that point, I think right now I've watched a good amount of Knicks games over the last couple of weeks, and I don't know why. Maybe I guess that's why I put Patrick in here, because I've somehow ended up watching so many Knicks games over the last few weeks. But to your point, I mean, if you looked at that front line right now, in the scope of right now, they're essentially starting two centers and a power forward. In today's NBA, you know what I mean? Charles Oakley is a center in today's NBA, and Anthony Mason is a power forward in today's NBA. Could be a center in some lineups, and some small lineups.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And Charles Oakley, and to you know what, to credit Charles Oakley, is just a better passer than I remembered him being. I didn't realize how good of a passer he was. Until really running it back and seeing, I mean, he threw every pass the exact same way he threw them, like he was sick of holding the basketball. But they were always on target. You know what I mean? It's not as pretty as when Joker throws a pass, but it was still effective.
No, he's chucking the ball as hard as he can.
As hard as he can.
That's a big, powerful guy.
Yeah. You're either going to catch it or you're going to break a fucking hand. So not a lot of room for error. And yeah, I mean, they go against these. And so one thing I do want to say, there was this one play, I think it's in the 93 playoffs, where just to give credit to the defensive presence that MJ is, where Patrick catches the ball on the left block and does a turnaround, turns baseline to shoot over Wennington, and here comes over Cartwright, and here comes MJ weak side. It ends up being a foul, but MJ dives in weak side and eats that shit. Yeah, and it's like you're just not seeing guys do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. You see Kawhi try that. You know what I mean? You'll see Kawhi do that, but you're not seeing any person. You're just not seeing. Oh, or Dwayne Wade in his prime. That is like the Dwayne Wade thing. Who's one of the leaders in blocks amongst guards. I think he still leads guards in blocks, actually. Who would come just weak side and block a fucking center. You know who else used to do that randomly? This has nothing to do with any of the guys we're talking about. Was Nate Robinson. You know what I mean? Who would just come out of nowhere and block the shit out of somebody, one of the big dudes. That's like a Nate Robinson special.
You got a famous one on Yao Ming.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. He fucking shout out to Nate, man. Shout out to Nate. But anyway, point being, And that is emblematic of Patrick's career. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
he can't get past MJ blocking that, which is the whole. This is why when they asked Horace Grant, could the Bulls beat the Lakers, and Horace Grant's answer was, well, yeah, MJ would find a way to
He would
neutralize.
have found a way.
It's because of plays like this. You know what I mean? That's like, yeah, he wasn't fucking scared of your size.
Nope.
And that's the story of Patrick's career. Who now, you know, I don't think people remember him poorly, but you know, couldn't get a coaching job, was kind of bullshit, honestly, with what happened to him. But then gave us one of the most famous clips in college, which is a one-legged turnaround. When have you practiced that shot?
You practiced that shot? When? When you practiced that?
I used it for Andre, who did that step back 3-pointer when he got to the Cavs this year, and I immediately found that GIF and posted it because it was just so fucking relevant. Anyway, shout out to Patrick, one of the best centers of all time. Yes. Really, you know, the '90s is not a golden era per se for centers, but it's like the golden era's child, which is if the golden era is Kareem, Wilt, and Bill Russell all occupying the same space, Willis Reed occupying the same space at the same time. Well, the '90s is a homage to that. You know what I mean? Where it's all of these great centers occupying the space. So, who you got next?
It's the silver age. It's the silver age of centers.
That's a great way to put it. That's why you're on here. Just eloquent. You know what I mean? All right, go ahead. Who you got next?
I want to say this about Oak, though, even though it's not about him. Charles Oakley would be a better player in 2020 than he even was in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. Much better passer he ever got credit for. Was actually a good jump shooter, and I'm positive he never got practice time shooting jump shots. Mm-hmm. And was a hard defender. Like he wasn't as part of the reason the Bulls traded him, and which pissed Michael off, mm-hmm. Was he was a little lumbering. Mm-hmm. But as a center in today's game, he wouldn't be able to switch as well as a lot of other guys, but would have been a perfectly fine, suitable center, and you could run your offense through him a little bit in the post. As a passer, a lot like Draymond.
That's a great point. And actually, there was I don't know if you see the NBA Together thing. Every night at 8 p.m. they broadcast the game on Twitter, YouTube. They go live, and they played the other day was Vince going for 50, and in that game, Oakley shoots a couple 3-pointers. You know what I mean? He was shooting them at a time when nobody would have expected him to do it. So in today's NBA game, 100%, he would have had the opportunity to spot up and shoot, and would have probably been a more effective shooter just with how the NBA has changed today. Was 100% ahead of his time. You know what I mean? Definitely ahead of his time. Not the most skilled around the basket per se, but would still be an effective roller at the very least, and would set fucking screens that are if you give Steph Charles Oakley, Steph is shooting threes, he shoots 17 a game. You know what I mean? Yeah. So wide open.
Gobbles up every rebound.
Correct. Yeah, exactly right. So and if he does it like you said about Draymond, you know that Draymond made a career on that play. Set the screen for Steph. They both collapse on Steph. He occupies the middle, gets the pass, immediately passes to someone cutting. Well, Oakley would have made that play 1,000 times out of 1,000. So, this is not about Oakley, but Oakley better than people remember. This is the perfect podcast to reminisce about Oakley.
Talk about Oakley.
Really, yeah. Yes. All right, so go ahead. Who you got next?
Justice for the blind, just something that'll find in the rhyme that are coming from my mind. Used to come